Some customers want to hear about it. Some customers are like, good to know. Have a nice day.
And when things are good, it's easy. But it turns out the internet doesn't have good days all the time.
Now, it's assuming we get to that point, because Terminator happened in, 2029?
Get to it fast.
Right here
On the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last.
right here.
On the Anycast.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm really excited today. We were just talking before we got going here that we've been in the industry basically equally as long, and somehow we've never actually crossed paths. So really exciting to get a chance to chat today. I'm here with Olga Kornienko. She is one of the co-founder of EZDRM. Olga, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for organizing all of this. I'm looking
Absolutely.
forward to our chat.
Me too. Even though we don't know what we're going to talk about, we'll figure it out.
I think that's how the best conversations happen.
That's how my whole life happens. So conversations as well. Before we get started, though, I don't want to leave people without an intro, and I'm not the best person to do it. So real quick, can you give us where you came from, how you got here in 2026? What do we need to know about Olga before we get started?
So, as you said, my name's Olga Kornienko. I'm the co-founder and COO of EZDRM. EZDRM is a hosted managed video security as a service company. We have been around we actually just celebrated our 23rd birthday a couple of days ago. So we've been around for quite some time. And we started out with Windows Media DRM way back when in 2003, and have grown it to a company that is that's involved in a lot of different video security projects, and we've touched upon provenance and C2PA lately, and looking to solve other video security solutions with some out-of-the-box thinking.
All right. We'll try and find the box, and then we'll try and figure out how to get out of it. Given you've been in this industry since its infancy, basically, sort of looking around today, is there anything that feels fundamentally different from even say like 2 or 3 years ago that's really changed the way we do things in the streaming space?
Well, from the place where we sit, I think the biggest difference is anything video security and DRM used to be more of we don't talk about it, we have to do it because we need to, and we don't really want to do it. But, a studio's twisting our hands, so we kind of have to. That used to be the conversation we were having a few years ago. I think sports rights are bringing more of the conversation around video security and piracy to the surface, because lately the conversations have been a lot more open. People have been a lot more, not fully, but more comfortable talking about the issues that they're currently experiencing. We're still in the point where, and I get it, people don't want to talk about security. They don't want to talk about problems they're having, because now you're admitting to issues, and sometimes it's hard to put a number on all of that. But I feel like the direction is shifting, and people are a lot more comfortable talking about where they sit as far as their security approach to all of their content.
Yeah, I see that too. I would say I always felt like DRM for people was like a 4-letter word, and they really didn't want to talk about it. And even when they did, they would say it somewhat sheepishly. Like when we talk to people about, what are you doing for authentication and authorization? They go, we sort of do DRM, But that was, 4 or 5 years ago. That's the way people talked about it. Today, I find most people we talk to, they're very upfront and center about it, and it's a core part of their strategy when it comes to content, I guess I would say. And I hadn't thought about the sports angle, but I always understood it to be something that was, important because it was contractually important to them.
Well, it is contractually important, and I don't know if I've seen it, but I've definitely heard of cases of companies contacting a DRM provider saying, hey, we need to get a contract. You get a contract, and then you never hear from them again. And then a studio goes, hey, is this a customer? And you're like, yes. And they're like, okay. But there's no conversation about the fact that there's 0 licenses being issued. So yes, they're a customer. Yes, they have a contract with DRM. I personally never seen it, but I've definitely heard people in the industry talking about it. Whereas now we get customers who are like, okay, I've tested it on this, and this. It works here. It doesn't work here. Why is that? Well, because this browser has these limitations. Okay, how do I correct that? Like, a lot more of a conversation. And it's actually kind of cool because, I mean, you don't want to feed pirates, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
Yeah. Do you see people, from an adoption standpoint, again, to me, I sort of see like the technical limitations to your point are overcomable. You just need to sort of do the initial work. So do you see the adoption happening now? Is that just the businesses maturing? Is it something technical? Is it something business related? Like, why do you see the evolution of that and people taking it more seriously?
I do think it's around, I mean, part of it is contractual, like you said. That is never going to go away. But part of it is also companies taking a beat and going, okay, like sports companies. We are paying X amount for our rights. Like, we don't want to throw money out the window, literally, is what it is. Because I forget what the numbers are and they constantly change, but I've heard of like 5 billion that is being lost within the sports industry or like crazy numbers like that. But I guess the big part of this conversation is that the numbers keep changing.
Right.
Nobody can ever put a price on those, like on actual content theft. And I guess it's hard because if you think about it, like let's say a sports league, I don't know, NBA, if they license their content to 5 different providers and one of them is leaked, it affects 4 others, right? So how do you account for that one that's leaked and the other 4 that are now getting the eyeballs that they should be and the revenue from either the streaming service or the ad revenue or whatever that they should be? So that's a hard number to pin down. Um, but I think sports are driving it a lot more, mostly because we all know how much sports rights and all those contract negotiations actually what those numbers are.
Yeah. I mean, just the numbers that got thrown around last summer and this summer for the World Cup and the World Team Cup. Crazy numbers.
Right?
But I hear your point about trying to, identify the real metric in terms of loss. I feel like it's also one of those things where I have this problem with like airline miles where I'm like, oh, this is a really good use of miles because I can get a business class ticket for 100,000 miles that would cost me $17,000. But it starts from the premise that if I didn't have the miles, I would pay $17,000 for that ticket. And I don't know that I would. So
I'm sorry,
then
what airline is that? Because Delta miles are they
I'm,
give them out like candy, but they also like, you know,
yeah, Air Canada is still okay with redemptions, but they're going away. But that's always what I go through too, right? Is like when you look at the numbers, the presumption that every single person who's pirating it would instead actually pay $29.99 to a legit provider to do like the math has to be inflated on some sort of you know ideal altruistic basis where the people would 100% of the people would pay for it if they didn't have access to the pirated stream, let's say. Um, but
well,
having said that, whatever the number is, it's still significant, right?
well, the 5 billion that I quoted, I got that from a survey done by Cinemedia a couple years ago, and I think the survey was actually like, if you didn't have access to all the pirated streams, would you just say forget it and never watch this content again?
Yeah.
Would you sign up for a service, or would you possibly just watch 1 or 2 games? Would you go to a game? Like, I think that's how they did that math, and that's how I think they got the number. Because I was talking about that survey at a different conversation at when I was presenting one of our new products at a Sports Pro, the event that's happening. Like there's one in New York, one in March, and
Yeah,
then
there's one in March.
yeah, one in New York in March and one in Madrid in November. I think there's more, but those are the 2 I go to. And I actually ran into one of the authors of the Cinemedia survey, and he's like, "Yeah, we made a point of trying to kind of figure out um, what people would do if they didn't have access to pirated streams."
Interesting. Then the potential number then is like infinitely higher, right? Like that's the identified 5 billion out of like a theoretical 25 billion or some crazy number like that probably.
Yeah, I don't know what the number is. And also, I mean, imagine if you sign up for, yet again, we'll pick on NBA or whoever. If you watched it off a pirated stream and you had a bad experience, now you have a different idea of the reputation of the actual organization. Like, piracy doesn't just touch actual revenue, it also touches things like brand reputation and potential merchandise you would buy or not. I feel like the number is definitely, how do you calculate all of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I think that's why it's front and center now, right? Is people uh, are identifying it as a significant, either opportunity or risk, um, as a rights holder for their businesses. Kind of the same question though is like, is that a sign of us being in a more mature market, or is that a sign of the evolution and it's still not really there? Like I sort of look at traditional broadcast, let's say, as that's now a 100-year story, right? So in the scheme of that, we're still really new into streaming, and um, we're now these were problems that started showing up in broadcast 80 years ago that we're now trying to tackle again. Are we there? Like that's always my question, right? Is like, where are we in terms of the story arc of streaming? Do you think?
Wow, that's like a deep question. Uh, really. I think it's interesting because you can't solve a problem until we identify it, right? And one of the things that I came across is while we were at IBC this past year, I was approached by a gentleman. Again, I'm just trying to remember the name, and off the top of my head, I don't have it. By a gentleman who is a writer for The Athletic, which is the sports section of the New York Times, or at least the sports area of the New York Times. I don't want to call it a section and somehow incorrectly identify it, but the sports arm of the New York Times. And we talked about what we see in piracy and what we see in content protection and whatnot. And then that writer did a whole big blog or podcast about sports, the issues in football, or what the US calls soccer, what England called football, and all the rules and restrictions around not being able to watch the games at certain parts of the day, and how piracy is trying to solve all their problems. And I think having a publication like New York Times bring that to the forefront is one of the few steps. I also think that now they start to identify problems, and he was pointing out the fact that why are the why is there a contract that says that you can't watch the game on a Sunday? I think it's from 3 to 5. Please don't you know go after me if I'm wrong, but there's a window on a Sunday that you can't watch the games on streaming because people are expected to go to the stadium. Well, that's not the case anymore, and I think streaming needs to catch up to the reality. And I feel like there's a lot of what I call casual piracy that happens because the contracts and what streaming is capable of do not follow the reality of what's going on. But to answer your question, I digress. Um, I think now that New York Times did an article about this, or a podcast, and more conversations are happening. Like IBC did a couple of panels on security and anti-piracy, and I know more conversations are happening. We're starting to identify the problem. I am kind of hoping it's the first step in a good direction. Yet again, I am one person, and what do I know? How do I control? I can't obviously control anything, but without identifying the problem, we can't even get anywhere. So I'm hoping that's a very good first step.
And in terms of you identifying the problem, like what would you say, whether it's sports or other rights holders, um, how would you frame the conversation that needs to happen more around that?
I think our industry as a whole, and by our industry, I mean the video security industry. Um, I think there's a lot of assumptions and old kind of knowledge about the fact that, or false knowledge about the fact that DRM solutions and video security approaches and everything else are expensive, unruly, and kind of like a big dark black box of mysterious things that you are just paying money for. Whereas we at EZDRM spend a lot of time educating people about the things we can. And because I had somebody who asked me to try to explain the Google CDM, which is the content decryption module, to them, and that's proprietary information we cannot. But we can do a lot of other education. I think that's part of it. And the other part of it is, as companies start to understand and assess and get more comfortable with the idea of how much money is being spent on or lost with content theft. Um, it is kind of becoming an easier conversation to have. Well, we're losing $1 million, and this is going to cost us $100,000 for the year, and then we should be able to recover 50% or 30%. Is that worth the conversation? Maybe yes, maybe no. Everybody has their own numbers. But I think once we start to identify the problem and understand the scope of it, then once you start talking to a vendor who is offering a solution and they say it's going to cost blah, it becomes you're comparing apples to apples, not apples to cherries.
Sure.
Cherries to nothing. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think there's a few different parts of the streaming ecosystem, let's say, where the economics are either fuzzy, bad, or broken.
Mhm.
Right? So it could be getting, content licensing itself or production, delivery, which is our bag, licensing, security, customer acquisition. Like we're fundamentally we're talking about an industry that is not exactly churning out a whole bunch of profit anywhere anyway today. And is still in, I think, way more of a growth story than a profit story.
Well, and also people look at it like, do I want to build it? Do I want to buy it? DRM looks like something I can build, and then they get into it and they're like, wait, okay, I can do these pieces, but I don't know about these pieces. And now I have 3 engineers supporting this thing. Do I really need to do that? And we have people who come to us and say, well, we started this and we don't want to do this anymore. So help.
Is there some threshold? Like I always tell people, like, listen, if you're Netflix, absolutely build your own CDN, right? Like, don't even bother. It might cost you more, right? And it might not be necessarily an economic advantage on the cost side, but you're gonna have so much more control. You're gonna be able to do all the things that you want. Yada yada yada. Is there like the top 3 streamers that we all name are the type of people who should be trying to roll their own DRM, and for everybody else, it's you should never try and build, or is it a little less cut and dry than that?
I think it's less cut and dry than that. Yet again, I'm not Netflix. I'm not, Paramount or Warner Brothers. So I can't really answer that question as well. I think it's also where you're comfortable with your resources and what you want to do.
Mhm.
Um, let's be honest, DRM is fairly commoditized. And the DRM we offer and any of our competitors offer, at the core of it is the same exact technology. It offers the same exact features, and you can build those, you can buy them from us. The pieces that are important and come into play after the fact is all the other experience we have within security, all the contacts that we manage. We do all, to some extent, talk between ourselves as well to kind of get a better understanding of what is going on in the industry. We all sit on content protection groups within SVTA and so on and so forth, and we all try to solve problems together. Whereas if you have somebody from a large organization that is doing security, now they have to be involved in everything else that we're doing. It's part of our job, right? So when you have somebody who's an expert in a specific field, obviously we are focusing on that and not on 12 different directions. But I do know of large plus services that are using vendors. I know that some of them are using 2 vendors in parallel, so you're not relying on just one, kind of like a multi CDN, multi DRM situation. And I also know people who've used, there's a large organization who used us as disaster recovery solution because it was quiet, 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 and all of a sudden, poof, whole bunch of stuff, and then nothing, 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 and poof, a whole bunch of stuff. Um, it is what you're comfortable with. If you have somebody who's a security person, go crazy. I mean, I think it's, I think it's what I think it all depends on the level of expertise that you have and what you're looking for.
Yeah. And I talk about CDN this way all the time, where if I look back 20 years ago, it was a CapEx thing, to the extent that there's a moat. The moat was actually having to build the infrastructure. Um, but that was the barrier to entry, was just like the getting servers all over the world. Today, like somebody wants servers all over the world, 60 pop CDN servers all over the world. I say, give me a credit card in about 18 minutes and I'll be back. So but when I look at it through that lens today, I go, well, today, yeah, that part became easy, but it's even more complicated operationally today. Right? Which is like when things are working well or when you're just doing the most basic stuff, It's like, oh yeah, I can take this template and I know how the technology works and I can apply it. In CDN land, that's, it all works fine until, as I say, there's a fiber cut in Denver on Comcast, right? And now it's like, well, I don't know how to I just set up the 60 nodes and I installed the software and I set up the DNS and yay. When things are good, it's easy. But it turns out the internet doesn't have good days all the time everywhere. In terms of DRM, thinking out loud about operationally, key rotation, stuff like that, those are sort of well, yeah, it's easy to set it up, but what happens when, what does it look like operationally though? Like, what are the challenges that people are going to have trying to do that on their own?
So I think the funniest part is when something goes wrong, it's the DRM's fault. Yet again, I've talked to a person from a player company, and they're like, "Oh no, it's always the player's fault." I'm like, "It's always our fault," from what I've heard. I don't know about you guys, but maybe it's also always the CDN's fault.
Generally, the
Yeah.
good news is everybody's multi-CDN, so they don't know which CDN's fault it is yet. But
Well, I think that's I mean, at the end of the day, we are in a multi-DRM, multi-cloud, multi-everything world is how we run our infrastructure. Um, you might have problems in one part of the world that you don't have problems in another part of the world. And if you are a company that is a broadcaster that is in the US and you are trying to use the US infrastructure and something goes awry, um, if you don't have the infrastructure in the rest of the world, then you're stuck. Whereas if you have the infrastructure in the rest of the world that you can always go, well, let me switch them over. And then once this gets fixed, then, whatever. There's a lot to it. And we hide, all the dirty little secrets and all the difficult stuff behind the scenes. Um, but yes, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of making sure that all the infrastructure is set up. And yeah, we can set it up everywhere. Um, that's not a problem. But operationally, it takes a lot of behind the scenes work to make sure that you're up to date on all of the rules and stuff with Whitevine and Fair Play and Play Ready and Clear Key and everything else that you need to do.
yeah, well, and to your point though, that's when you start having to have dedicated head count that's involved in all the working groups and needs to stay up to date and stuff like that. I think
Exactly.
it's a heavy cost for people, I think.
And it depends. I know people who really want it and that makes sense for them. And for others, they're like, yeah, no, it's easy to just talk to somebody, like I always say, I want our customers to treat us as a DRM and security partner, not a vendor, because we want to know what's going on. We want to know if somebody's having events, if they're having, um, like they're going to run more games or something is going on that we need to keep an eye on. And then if they're being approached about an interesting, we're trying to do this. How do we do this? Come talk to us, not just as your vendor, but as, hey, here's the problem we're trying to solve. How would we solve it?
Yeah, and I mean, and the difference between the vendor side and the partner side is also like, what can you do that makes it strategically an advantage for you, right? So like, anytime somebody's dealing with a vendor, they're basically saying, I'm just going to get some sort of minimum level of thing that I need for compliance or to meet a contract or whatever. But once you take that next step to the partnership level, now you have people typically trying to get more creative. What can I do? Right. So, keeping that in mind, is there on the strategic advantage side, if somebody is doing things well, um, how does one, take things and make it an advantage, not just a checkbox on a compliance document? Like, is there an element of that related to provenance and C2PA? Like, how does somebody partner with you and actually build a strategy that is valuable for them outside of the scope of just piracy?
I think it depends on how a customer sees you. And you can't, there's nothing I can say to break that.
Hmm.
But we do have customers that have approached us last year and said, we're going to get this new content. It's going to be this type of content. We're trying to solve this problem. We're being given these following restrictions. We just don't know how to get there. We're
Hmm.
like, okay, we've dealt with this before, and let's see how we can do this, help you guys out, and then come up with a creative solution where we're not only addressing the newest, most current devices, but some of the older devices. And how do we solve this for you? Because At the end of the day, my job, this is almost like dancing. Like, my job is to make you look good, right? Um, if I make you look bad, then what's the point in all of this? But I can't make you look good unless I know what you want. Um, so, and that is totally a customer relationship thing and a conversation. And the customer who wants to actually do this. Some customers just turn it on and walk away and never talk to you again, and only reach out when something goes awry.
Is that a good customer or a bad customer?
You know, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Partially, ideally, I would love to know what our customers are doing, be in check, and have sync ups with them all the time because they might be having problems we don't know about. I was talking to somebody from one of the studios the other day, and I said, we are solving these problems which we think exist based on what we hear. But we don't know anything from what is actually happening with you guys because that requires an NDA and a conversation and somebody honestly saying, yes, there's a problem here. No, there's no problem here. And sometimes that's not easy to identify, to talk about, or to even, I don't know, sometimes just not super important. We'll cross that bridge when we get there because there's 75 other things on fire. And this is like thing number 76. But if you take the 20 minutes now and tell us about it, that 76th thing that's on fire, we can solve that for you. And you don't have to worry about it anymore. But it is also priority for a customer. And yet again, those are the things I cannot control and I cannot change. I wish I could. I wish I had that power, but yeah. But definitely, yeah, provenance is another one of those things that we've been doing a lot of talking about and educating people about. And at this point, I don't know if people know too much about provenance. It's a conversation that's kind of new, but also I want to say kind of old, which I've been talking about it for 4 years. Yeah, it's some customers want to hear about it. Some customers are like, good to know. Have a nice day. Doesn't apply.
For those who don't know who are listening, give us a 2-minute overview. What's whenever I hear provenance, I always think it in terms of like the legal evidentiary chain. But obviously that we're now in the digital world. What does digital provenance look like today?
My CMO at some point equated it to art, which I think is the most perfect conversation. But the idea is this. So in 2019, Adobe was one of the founders of an organization called CAI, Content Authenticity Initiative. And the idea is to figure out how we validate the content we see online. How do we know that what we're looking at is actually what it is? They also wanted to figure out a whole bunch of open source tools around that and create a community about people who do want to, talk about provenance. But if you want open source tools, you have to have standards. So in 2021, C2PA was born. It stands for Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. And right now, when we hear C2PA, it just means provenance information. The basic idea behind C2PA is standardizing all of the provenance information. And the overall goal of both CAI and C2PA is to validate that this video that we're recording is actually what was recorded and that nobody's putting any words in your mouth or my mouth. And that after it's published on LinkedIn or any other socials, that nothing was changed. And if it was, record that. Maybe somebody saw that my room is a bit dark and somehow they were able to just punch up the light in my room. I don't know. Wishful thinking, right?
Hear that, editors?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, guys, darkness. But if that was the only change and that was recorded, we know that from the original that it was recorded exactly like this. Somebody just made my room a little bit lighter. But nobody clipped it, or maybe they wanted to just clip off the very top of this thing so we don't have to have all this dead space above us. But nobody changed words. Nobody changed anything. And create basically a chain of all the changes so that we know what the original was versus what the actual content that you're looking at. C2P is never meant to be as a validator of truth. So if I talk about this pen being, we see that it's blue, right? If I talk about this pen being pink, The CTPA is not going to go, wait, Olga's lying. This is a blue pen, not a pink pen, right? It's not meant for that. It's literally meant, like, as my CMO says, like art. Yes, this is a original Vincent Van Gogh, and yes, it changed hands this way. And now that I'm purchasing it, I know this is an original because of all of this provenance that goes with it. And DRM actually goes hand in hand with that because DRM is the rules of how you can use this piece of content. You may or may not want to apply DRM to like a news piece of content, but you definitely want a news article that comes from CNN, BBC, or whoever to actually be correct. And you want it to be exactly what BBC, CNN, or pick your news outlet, what they said. That's kind of the 10,000-foot overview of what C2PA is.
Yeah, I mean, there is probably no way to have the conversation without talking about AI in some way, if for no other reason than, that's a significant lowering of the bar in terms of the investment it would take to manipulate content, right? So go back 5 years ago, you're talking about, a person deciding to spend some number of hours editing, a piece of content. Today you're talking about somebody typing a few prompts into a thing and coming up with 30 new versions of this video.
Well, and C2PA is being very much embraced by the industry. My phone, which is a Samsung Galaxy 25, so it came out last year, fully supports C2PA for content that's AI generated. So
Okay.
it will be signed as AI generated. C2PA is not meant to identify that it is AI generated unless somebody actually specifically says that. But it is meant, like, I can log in at, as I'm assigning all the information to my content, I can say that this was partially AI generated, I used blah, blah tools to generate this and specify whatever it is that I want.
Yeah. And as a rights holder or copyright holder, I would think it's valuable to it makes my works more valuable in the same way that it works in the art world, right? There's a if the provenance can be verified, then that takes out a whole bunch of questions. What if I'm trying to sell a catalog or relicense a catalog or whatever that I'm trying to do?
Well, and also, I think I've mentioned brand reputation before. It supports brand reputation. It supports rights holders' reputation. Like, I don't want to put out horrible quality NBA, NFL. We're still talking about sports, right? A broadcast, have it get butchered, and then somebody watching this and going, "Yee, why am I? Yee, I don't want to watch this anymore. It's horrible," right?
Yeah.
But it's not the product you put out. Or, I always, my examples is usually the news. You take a political leader of any country, you take out a knot or add a knot, and then changes the whole picture. And you can manipulate markets. Even if you just did it for 5 minutes, you pushed out some video where some leader is saying something. You make a change. If it goes viral enough, you can manipulate markets. Or things like, we see a lot of stuff that is shown in the news that is being recorded from people's phones. News organizations have to validate that. But what if it came with recorded by Olga Kornienko? And if it's hacked, edited, they know exactly whose butt to hunt down and who to parade afterwards, who is providing, fake information to the news organizations.
Sure.
You have that. You have better consistency and better transparency of everything you're looking at.
And in terms of how that's valuable for, let's stick with the sports example, right? So, we already know that there's, some amount of revenue loss just from people pirating streams. I just want to restate what you said. There's also a ton of potential brand reputation loss by people manipulating either in terms of quality, in terms of what the actual content is, but taking something that, you was a 30-second clip in, 4K video that, is showing up on somebody's phone as a 9-second clip with some new audio and, and potentially a much lower resolution and going, here's the, NBA highlights from yesterday. That devalues the brand of the NBA. Is that what we're talking about?
I think it could. I think it's up to the NBA, or actually more the end viewer, to decide. Um, I think that there's a market for, voice overlays over sports things where if somebody could just say, hey, the Olympics coming up, here's what happened, give me clips and just give me the results for all the sports in like a 30-second clip, I would be happy. Um, so there's of course a market for that, but would it devalue the brand? Possibly. I don't know. I think it depends on the user who is watching it and how they want to consume it. I always go back to think olden days when people would pirate movies by sitting in the back of the movie theater and watching,
Cams.
recording with the camera, and then you see like somebody walking by, right?
Yeah.
If somebody can't afford to go to the movies and just wants to know what the movie, or even doesn't have the time, or can't because they need to like get babysitters and blah blah blah, and it's just easier to watch this movie when the kids are asleep but it's still in the movie theater, but you know that everybody in the office is going to be talking about it and you're the only one because you couldn't. Can you grab a pirated video or pirated movie, watch it so you know what the plot is and you're not left out? Do you care if people are walking by? No. Somebody who wanted to have the full experience of an IMAX saw this and said, "This is horrendous." Like, I think it also depends on your expectation.
Sure. Well, and there's certainly also in that chain of rights holders, there's also people with different interests along the way. I always think of the music industry just because it sort of happened there first, just by a function of the bandwidth restrictions. But you go like most artists weren't all that hurt by their content being pirated, right? Yes, they lost 0.0000001 cent per stream, but then they sold that person who loved their music a $295 concert ticket. Whereas the record company, who lost all $14.9999 of that stream or that sale, were greatly affected, by somebody's choice to pirate that. And if you go up the value chain for video, it's probably the same, right? Like, there's probably actors who are very happy that an extra 30 million people know their name because they watched a pirated, version of their film. On the flip side, there's a whole bunch of people who didn't get residuals, and there's a whole bunch of people who didn't get box office revenue. So I think it's just a hard thing to pin down because there's just so many disparate interests in having somebody see a film
Yeah,
versus somebody buy a film, let's say.
well, I also think that there's if you go back to um the SAG-AFTRA strike of a couple years ago, when there were actors who were talking about the fact that they're not working full time and they can't afford health insurance because they're not getting the residuals and blah blah blah. I mean, we all think that actors are, Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford, but it's everybody else who is involved in the movie and film industry. And I genuinely think it's not a victimless crime to pirate a movie.
No, it's definitely it's just who are the victims and who are the people who benefit, I think was more the question.
Yeah. But I also definitely think that there should be more rules around, like, I travel. If anybody who knows me knows that I live on a plane about 50% of the year. And when I was in Uruguay last week for a wonderful summer camp tech event. When I land in Uruguay, I should be able to have access to the content I'm allowed to watch. I have a home DVR thing that I record all my shows on. As I wind down, I should be able to watch it. But DVR is like, you're not on your home network. You can't watch it. Why? It's recorded on my account. Why can't I watch it? We have the technology to prevent me from casting it. We have the technology to prevent me from doing all sorts of things. Just let me watch my TV on my quiet little iPad as I slowly fall asleep. Like, and that's the kind of stuff that randomly generates piracy. It's doesn't cost anybody anything. Does it matter if I watch it here in Uruguay? Absolutely not. As long as I'm following a certain set of rules, including not casting it to the whole world, you know?
Yeah, I like your NBA example. I'm a recovering Toronto Raptors fan, and before I started recovering, I watched every game, didn't matter where I was, traveled a lot. I had, in order to be able to watch I don't even think I could watch. There was times I couldn't even watch all 82 games. But in order to be able to watch most of the 82 games, I had an NBA.com League Pass thing that was like $200 a year. I had uh, 2 different add-on packages at home that were another whatever, $14 a month, something like that. But then with one of those packages, I couldn't stream it. So then I had to sign up for tsn.ca for streaming. That was another $15 a month. Like, to be somebody who is like following the rules, to your point, when they don't make sense, it becomes like, forget the expense of it. It was like complicated. Like it was like, oh, who's going to have the rights? Oh, that's a blackout in this region for this reason. I needed to know which network was airing it in the U.S. because that dictated what rights they would have to rebroadcast it and stream it to me in Canada. It was just like I needed a flowchart to watch a basketball game, and I don't know who that serves. To your point, right? Like if you look at who are the winners in that whole list of things, nobody wins. Like every single person there is going, well, no, it would be better if our customer experienced it this way and this way and this way.
I was accidental fly on the wall in a plane. I was going to NAB last year, and right next to me were 2 people. One woman was a teacher who was going with her husband to Vegas, and a guy was going to the conference, but it turns out that the guy actually used to live in the same city that the teacher teaches in. So they kind of bonded over that, and they were talking, and she was saying that she teaches in a school. She teaches high school kids. And what you just described, most of them can't afford that. So she has really good basketball players that would love to follow a player. Like, the stuff around all the women's basketball that's becoming very, very more popular nowadays, which yay. But like you couldn't follow Caitlin Clark because there's no subscription that allows you to follow one player or one team. You have to have all of that, and what you just described was chaos. Plus, it's a large amount of money, and you can't just, especially as a kid, you can't afford that. And if your parents have regular television, which is TV, phone, internet, in New York areas with $200 a month, plus you have 1 or 2 streaming services, plus if you have to pay for all the basketball, it's unruly. Um, I oftentimes go to conferences and I say crazy, like people who make large amounts of money sit there and philosophize on what an average American wants to watch, on TV, or if they want a package. And you're like, really? How do you, making very crazy 6 figures, know what a family of 4 or 5 in the middle of United States making $40,000-$50,000 actually wants and can afford? And I think there's a disconnect there. And I really think that if we listen to the customer more, we would also cut down on video security issues. But this woman was basically saying that she would throw viewing parties at the school, and she would buy everybody pizza and wings and bring in her husband's or hers, depending on the sport, streaming service, and they would watch it in school. Is that technically considered piracy because she's throwing a viewing party? Possibly. Um,
I know in the broadcast world who would like to come knock on her door and say, oh, you need to pay an event licensing broadcast fee or whatever.
exactly. But is that reasonable? She's showing a whole bunch of high school kids who want to learn how to play basketball better and maybe make a career, or at least college hoops out of that. I feel like we're creating a problem that doesn't need to exist and has a solution, but it requires, I don't know, if is it better to, would you take a pay cut because you're not selling SIP subscriptions, or you're selling specific games? Because we can do that. I mean, the technology out there exists for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also, just to go off on the tangent, I'm still surprised that we haven't, for whatever reason, gotten to the point where there's a more customized viewing experience at home. Um, like I think of F1 or NASCAR early on, they already solved it even with DirecTV, right? Like you could get the per car feed was its own channel. So if you had a favorite driver, you just turned on that car's channel. Well, I grew up playing baseball. to me, the least interesting view of all time I could ever watch a baseball game with is over the pitcher's shoulder, throwing pitches to home plate. I want to know if the shortstop is cheating to the left because he knows it's an off-speed pitch. I want to know, I want to see what the outfielder is doing. And like ostensibly, I could have all those feeds and I could make my own, right? I could just pick the feed I want to watch and that sort of thing. And I always thought that was coming as we had like the technology for it. And it just seems that today the innovation is just repackaging what was meant for broadcast. Like the innovation is whether you get the broadcast feed in 6 seconds or 4 seconds over streaming. How do you see? I mean, I guess a different way to say it is like, are we making smarter choices that allow us to innovate, or is this still just like repurposing everything out of traditional broadcast for streaming still?
It's funny you say that. Well, first of all, some of that innovation is coming. Like Formula One definitely gives you the option to, create your own experience where you have access to different cameras and you can figure out which one you want to watch.
Yeah.
The technology is there. But I oftentimes, like you said, I oftentimes wonder if we are solving problems that don't exist and then telling people that they exist. And then we kind of try to create a problem and then solve it ourselves. Because I've asked that question a whole bunch of times. And I just mentioned one of our pre-call or pre-chat to this webinar. I mentioned that I was in Uruguay, and there was an interesting conversation around innovation in our industry. And there was a conversation amongst a whole bunch of people who got together in Uruguay and kind of chatted about what the problems are out there and how we would solve them. But one of the rules was that the technology for that doesn't need to exist yet. And I think one of the first things we did is we identified the problem that exists. And we had people from different, right? We had a creator, we had a couple of rights holders, we had technology solution providers. So we had people from all different directions. And there's a lot of good conversation about identifying the problem and then trying to figure out how to solve it. But if you put a whole bunch of engineers in a room trying to solve a problem, they're going to try to solve it like with the technology that's already existing, and they're going to try to figure out which API to use for what thing and blah, blah, blah. And I think sometimes saying, let's solve a problem this way requires a little bit of courage, a little bit of, how do I put this? No commitment to your shareholders, because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to lose money. And you have to be able to play and make those mistakes, but also listen to your customers. And I guess this goes back to I want my customers to be my partner, to want to be their partner, because I want to know what the problems they're experiencing, and not for us to just say, hey, we have a new solution for key rotation, because we think this is what the industry needs, but we actually want to hear from the industry. Hey, what is the problem you're actually having and how do we solve it? And I think it's a chicken and egg thing. And for that, a lot more of us have to be a lot more honest and a lot more comfortable in the vulnerability that we don't know everything and we don't know how to solve this. And that, yeah, man, that requires you to be honest and vulnerable. And I don't know how many people are comfortable in that.
Yeah. And or that you're talking to the right person, right?
Exactly.
I think it's interesting because you're probably closer, even though you're a technology partner for people, you're still a little closer to like, call it the real business. Whereas like I frequently have to remind our salespeople, and like nobody's not a single customer is in business just to buy CDN from us. This is not their business. They are consuming this in order to do their actual business, which is not this. And
Exactly.
their actual business is not about CDN. It's not about anything, right? Like even if you take, that use case of a streaming company, right? Well, what's their business? Their business is to, have content and have a user enjoy it. The CDN is just like an unfortunate thing that needs to exist to make that happen. But it's not part of the business. Like that is not something that the business thinks of as a real challenge or a real problem. It is a means to an end. And I sort of wonder, and maybe you have an opinion on your side, because you see, we all kind of see the whole chain, but I think I think there's something unique about the DRM piece where you actually do really get to see all the components of delivery from encoding all the way to player, because you have like compatibility problems that exist across the whole way. For the most part, knock on wood, if we can deliver something over HTTP, it's probably going to work for everybody. So do you see people making smarter architectural choices or just more complicated ones today?
I think CMAF made it a little bit easier. But with that said, CMAF doesn't work on older devices, so that just creates a whole other big complicated issue. Um, it's funny, back to your original comment, you need to have the right people in the room to do this. And also, I think you need to have the right people who can say, I don't know, let me ask somebody.
Right.
Because I also think that the ability to say, I don't know is also an important one in the world we live in. And say, hey, I don't know, but I think I know somebody who can answer the question. So let's all try to solve this together. And we do, as DRM, we do touch on the player side and the encoding packaging side. So we do, with that said, it's funny. The way we engineered our solution is that we tell people how to integrate with this set of packagers and coders and this set of players. And if all goes well, the customer goes, hey, how do I do this? Here's some documentation, la 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 la, licenses are flowing. I actually don't know if anything around the player or if there's any infrastructure changes that are happening, to my point of saying I don't know. I truly don't know. It's we are, just like you said, CDN is this piece. Security is this little tiny piece. And the best type of security is the one that nobody sees. Because if you see it, things aren't working, right? So our best position is to be practically invisible to the end user, where things just work, and then be perfectly, compatible with everything that the customer is doing. And that requires some thought and trickery at times.
Yeah. Speaking of the viewer, like, has viewer behavior ever actually changed the way, as an industry, we talk about viewer behavior changing? Like, I feel like a lot of things are held up by this premise that, like, you know, customer behavior will change over time as there's more streaming services and yada yada yada. Like, in practice, does the customer actually look any different than they did 5 years ago in terms of sophistication, or let's call it tolerance for problems, or any of the things that you know the industry sort of needs to change?
So when you say viewer, you mean end user, you and me, or customer as in, I don't know, a broad streaming service?
I'm thinking end user, you and I, like that person at home with a remote in their hand. Does their behavior ever actually change the way we talk about it changing?
Well, yet again, story from a plane, right? Um, I know personally, I have less patience for watching TV. I almost feel like TV's gotten a bit more boring lately, but yet again, it could be the fact that my attention span is just not correctly long enough. But how many times have we like watched TV and did something on our phone and had like something else going on in the background? Um, my story from the plane is I was yet again on my way to NAB, different trip. I was sitting right next to a high schooler, and this kid was on Instagram, I think, and he would pull up a video, and the moment it started playing, he would go to comments. He didn't watch the actual video, he read the comments. And then literally maybe 10 seconds later was next. He watched the video started, he popped up the comments, he read the top comments and said next. I can't imagine that watching the video that, I just pulled up. And for me, that was shocking to the point where I almost said, hey, can you elaborate for me what you're doing? But I didn't want to be the weird, creepy lady who's like harassing a teenager, right?
Yeah.
But that was completely mind blowing. And like, if you think about it's that generation, my mother, I've seen her sit on the couch, have the TV on, have an iPad in her hand where she's playing, or have no TV on, but have one iPad that's showing her some video on YouTube. Oh, she's also playing and doing something else. Because I don't think it's just generational; it's everybody.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I don't know about you, but I definitely can't, somebody to me said, if you want to watch a video about this, I'm like, no, I don't have the time to watch a 25-minute video explaining to me how this works. Give it to me in little tiny snippets. That's
Yeah.
it.
Well, it's definitely an attention. I mean, I would say, I guess the common theme there is like all of our attention spans have, been slowly moving one direction. But in the case of that, like, younger generation, it's always, their experience with technology has been um, uh, very short attention span driven. Like, I think, I was probably the second, probably the last generation to have like a modem to access the internet. And I can tell you, your experience of the internet is different when it takes you 32 hours to download one song versus, you can watch anything you want in a 30-second video. So like you sort of got used to really having some delayed gratification, when your bandwidth was, at 56K modem.
You know, and we actually, if you think about it, we had a situation once where a customer, instead of saying, because like when the DRM rules go back and forth, one of them is play equals true or false. One of the rules says whether or not the video should actually play. We had a customer once who accidentally said play equals false. So you see what happens very quickly and very scarily how it all escalates because a person presses play and the content doesn't play. They press play again and again and again and again. And then in about a minute or so, they're going to start going online and yelling that the service isn't working. Um, and I feel like we're also a lot less patient and expect everything to just work.
Yeah.
Which is why I asked you consumers versus people in the industry, because people in the industry, like, there's a problem, we understand. Things happen, a
We're
bird
also, let's be
the
honest,
water and fell through, and now we're all stuck.
we're still all amazed it works at all. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Realistically.
Exactly. We're like, holy wow, that just totally worked. And
Yeah.
we're streaming what from where to who? Um, as this weekend, I don't know when this plays, but this is being recorded right before the Olympics open,
Hmm.
and like Super Bowl
And Super
goes
Bowl. Yeah.
live and everything else. And we're gonna pull it off as an industry, all of it, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of exciting to watch how, especially, how many countries do Olympics stream to, and how many countries does Super Bowl go to, and the millions and kabillions of viewers that are gonna watch all of that is just overwhelming. And it's being delivered successfully by all the organizations that are doing it. And we as the industry know what's involved, but I feel like the user just expects it to be there.
Well, and expectation is the word to me that like that's what I would say, like what's changed of user experience. Like even you go back, say 10 to 14 years ago, let's say, let's call it 2010. So say 10 to 16 years ago. Like even my parents, um, if they press play on Netflix 10 years ago, would like call a friend. Right? Like I just press play on this box thing and there's like moving pictures on my screen, but it's not coming from the satellites or the thing. Like this is like the novelty factor was off the charts. And when something's a novelty, you have a lot of patience
Yep.
and very low expectations. But you give somebody a novelty over and over again, and then give them like some exclusive content they can only watch using the novelty. And all of a sudden, this like, oh, this is this neat technology thing that there's, this is like, what do you mean? I press play. What do you mean it's buffering? Why is it buffering? I don't understand what's that. Well, how is it? And so, the expectation jump for users from this is cool technology that we're still all trying to sort out. That is, as I mentioned earlier, in its infancy on any time scale or user scale compared to broadcast. Now all of a sudden is like, well, I'm paying for it. This thing better work. Um, and that happened, you know, 10 years in the grand scheme of things is kind of in the blink of an eye. But people have been trained that like it's going to work like TV. And I still think that's hard for the industry to deliver on, right? Like Super Bowl and Olympics are going to work, but there's going to be a long jump and it's going to go somewhere on Earth. Somebody will, will not see the landing. Um, and that's just different, right? And expectations have again evolved really quickly from novelty to not. But
Well, we have one of our customers is in the sports betting realm.
Mhm.
And the sports betting realm where People bet on plays, people bet on kicks, people bet on whether or not the ball is going to connect on the other end of the pass, right? Um, and I remember, I'll take your timeline 10 years ago when somebody said that we would need to deliver a license in 4 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds. We were like, yeah, why? Today, in betting, when the time frames is so little, but you need to be able to see the content, absolutely. If the license is not delivered in the teeny meeny millisecond time that it needs to get there, they can't watch it, they can't place a bet, and the whole business model is ruined. And that also creates an expectation that the licenses would just be issued. And a human eye can't, like, I think, what is it? For like a conversation like this, I think it's a second where if my mouth and the sound don't connect, our brain still puts them together. And we really figure out what a 4 milliseconds actually looks like. Yet the expectation is that, light's going to go everywhere and licenses will just get there in 4 milliseconds because somebody wants to place a bet on blah, blah.
Yeah.
I think we're moving in a cool direction. I'm just trying to figure out if there's a limit to it. Like, is there a
Well,
problem that we're trying to solve that really doesn't exist, but we're still trying to solve it with something?
I mean, there are for sure. I mean, you know, there is no technology that you can't throw a problem at and
Yeah, like
to
that.
try and solve. But on the flip side, at some point, again, the betting industry or the gaming industry, either one, at least there's reality there because they're saying I have an economic problem, and if you solve this, there's economic results. Um, I can't practically tell you what the difference is if the Super Bowl streams to my mobile device in 18 seconds versus 12 seconds this year. Like technology wise, yes, there would be an improvement in, the HLS buffer time or whatever. But like economically, what has changed for either the NFL or Comcast, who I think has it on Peacock this year, or me or anybody is like, I don't know, there was 6 seconds of productivity when the first buffer started, or, like, that's not, like, a problem until there's, like, a real economic problem that gets solved with it. It's still just, technology showing off a little bit to say that, like, "Oh, yeah, it streamed not as far away from broadcast this year." I was like, "Great."
Well, and we use this example of, you're watching a game and then your neighbors are cheering and then you don't know what happened. Ironically enough, I've used this problem a couple times and then somebody's like, yeah, I had that happen to me 2 days ago. And I was sitting there going, who scored? But I mean, I think that's where the economics might kick in because you'll be like, hey, neighbor, what's the service you're using? Because if I have options of services, then that matters. 6 seconds doesn't. A minute, and yeah, it's yet again, sounds stupid. It's a minute. Really, how big of a time is it? But for a minute, you're trying to figure if your team scores or not. That's kind of annoying.
Well,
Uh,
and go back to the attention span, conversation we were having as well, right? Like, realistically, that's also the thing that I think most businesses are coming to grips with, yes, is like, if you're I'll just say, if you're Peacock streaming the Super Bowl, your competition is not the cable provider, right? Your competition is the cable provider and YouTube and that email that just came in and that text message somebody just got and that recipe that they want to make on their iPad, at halftime. And
and
like
Instagram, and
and
like,
Instagram, and like you're fighting for people's attention. You're not just saying, I would like them to procure streaming services over my streaming service compared to another one or traditional broadcast or whatever. There's a little bit of that economically, but like we have a customer um, that has a really large online kids game, and it came up way too late. This is somebody we think of as a technology partner, also not just a client. And in some meeting way too late, we were talking about like competition. And we're like, oh, so it's probably this other big online game. They're like, no, 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 our competition is YouTube. And so their internal metric is that if a kid sends another kid or a player sends another player a link, that link needs to start in the same time that it would take to open a YouTube video, because that's the attention span that people are being wired for hey, come do this thing with me. And so that that opens up a whole different can of worms when it's like your competition isn't just the old technology versus the new and nothing better. Your competition is like every company on earth is your competition, and if you're in the entertainment space, that's really what you're fighting for, right? Is eyeball time, and the end user, whatever we are, doesn't care. They don't want to slice it by vertical. They're just like, I did something that was interesting.
Yep.
Maybe it was a YouTube video. Maybe it was opening a game. Maybe it was talking to ChatGPT. Whereas we like to think of it as like, oh, more people are watching this video than this video, but in practice, that's not how people are multitasking, if you will. Like including, as you said, it's not just the younger generation, right? Everybody's got 3 different devices open.
Yeah, and we all I oftentimes put something in the background and walk around the house and just listen. Like as I'm catching up on the show, I fessed up before that I watch soap operas. I also
Okay.
travel. So, soap opera progress takes time and, blah, blah, blah. So oftentimes you just hit play and walk away and I just listen to it. And if something interesting happens, I'm like, ooh, wait, come back. Like watch the 2 seconds that it took to for somebody it turns out somebody has cancer. Um, but it's not actually them, it's their twin type of thing. Typical soap opera stuff.
Yeah.
But you need to go see that, and you're like, okay, fine. And then, blah, 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 blah happens over the next 4 or 5 episodes, and then the next interesting thing happens again on Friday. So I have it completely in the background. What ads are happening? Oh God, I wish I could skip over them. Like, you know what I mean? I don't pay attention to ads. I tune them out. Um, and as a consumer, as the consumer of this technology. So yeah, I fully agree. I actually never thought about it that way. I like it that we are competing with everybody, not
I
just
It's just
another
it's
broadcast.
what you described, right? It's like, um, people just want that next dopamine thing, and that's why TV is a little bit boring, right? Is there's not enough hits usually because if you think of how you actually watch stuff, or actually how you entertain yourself on your phone, let's say, it's very, self-paced, right? I'm gonna scroll this a little bit. No, I'm gonna switch apps. Oh, there's a hilarious cat video. Oh my god, that's amazing. I'm gonna go back to reading this article. Whereas, traditional TV, linear is just it's a pace that some producer or showrunner chose, and you're gonna sit through it whether you like it or not. Um, and I realistically, I fast forward through YouTube videos in a way that I would never forward through a broadcast television show, right? Because I'm looking for just what I'm looking for. And on TV, you're sort of like, you got to watch the whole soap opera and then you hear the interesting part and you go back to it.
Somebody actually just told me, I think they heard it in an interview. I'm gonna because not to get myself in trouble and put words in people's mouths and
Okay.
whatnot, I'll just make it vague. So from what I heard, from what I was told, that one of the bigger movie celebrities was saying that for newer shows from that people are writing now, the plot has to be restated a couple of times throughout the show because people are doing exactly what we're talking about. And sometimes like, hey, what just happened? I don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden the character goes, oh yeah, and blah blah, and restates the plot. And you're like, oh, I follow now, and you walk away again. I am curious to start paying attention to that because I never paid attention to it. I think it's a newish requirement from what I heard. Um, so I am very curious to see if it actually happens, if I catch it, and if I'm annoyed by it because I'm actually watching the whole episode, or if it's something that is done so smoothly and so seamlessly that it just blends in because part of my attention is, in my phone and my email and, whatever else is going on.
Yeah.
The bird that's chirping outside, yada, yada, yada.
It's like having to explain the joke, right? And then after a scene, it's like, oh, that was funny because 2 scenes ago I said that thing. You're right. Ha ha ha. But again, it's a different world. And I think TV, uh, TV still produces, the biggest, hooks, right? Like the things that people will wait for and binge. You can't binge anything but something designed for linear, really. But having said that, what do you think we will laugh at 5 years from now that we think is really um, like a core belief today?
Wow, that's a good question. Given how quickly everything changes. Um, hmm. Well, I'll go back to C2PA. Um, as of right now, I genuinely believe that I want to know what the content is and who produced it and whether or not it's been changed. I came across a comment recently that that's totally not the case, and there's a trend to completely get away from this thing. I absolutely wholeheartedly don't agree with that idea. So I'm curious what the industry will bring. I am very curious to see if in 5 years from now we're gonna go, wow, that was a crazy idea, or vice versa, that was a great idea. Whoever thought otherwise was just a complete silly goose, right? Because I do think that going forward in the world of AI and fake content and whatnot, people who care would want to know where their content comes from. But yet again, was it I watched one of those late night TV shows where people were talking about, you know, different experiences within different US is divided politically, right, from different organizations and different groups and different political parties. And somebody basically said, I I don't care. They knew that something that was they believed was proven wrong to them, and they genuinely said, I don't care. I believe what I believe, and I don't care if you try
Don't
to prove
confuse me
me.
with the facts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I know that if you are in that mindset, doesn't really matter what information you're given, but I am truly, genuinely hoping that people would care if it's a fact or not, and what you're presented is lie or not. So let's see where we go from here.
Yeah. It's funny. Mine, I'm probably, I think AI today stands out just because it's like new and shiny, but I think it fades into the background. So like mine actually I would say is probably that, right? Like I think we're going to look back and think it was silly that we were so worried about whether something was generated by AI because other than the fact that it's a little bit faster slash it's a little bit lower barrier to entry or whatever, like no, I never had to see a disclaimer that the Starship Enterprise was not actually in space. And like AI fundamentally is a computer making special effects. And
I don't agree with you there fully.
no, talk to me.
I can get a political leader to say whatever they want.
Yeah.
You can get me to say whatever I want, whatever
Yes.
you want. I mean, you can have me start dropping F-bomb and N-words and try to prove that I didn't actually say that. The amount of artificial fake nudity that is attributed to women or celebrities
And
that is
I'm not saying those things aren't happening. I'm just saying if I wanted to make a political leader say something that they didn't say, George Lucas already could have done that in 1978.
okay, no
What's
argument.
difference is the barrier, right?
It's
Is that
so much easier to do that.
it's so much easier. But special effect AI is just special effects, right?
Okay, I will agree with you there for the purposes of video making.
Yeah. So I just see it as like, yeah, it's really because we haven't wrapped our minds around it yet. But I think in 5 years we're gonna go back and go, you know what? Okay, yes, there's now this new thing that's makes us even more paranoid, right? Like that would be the other thing is there'll be some new existential threat that will be way worse than like a faked video. Um,
It's assuming we get to that point because Terminator happened in what, 2029? So
yes, yes.
but
Assuming we don't engage thermonuclear war as a result of an AI video before 5 years.
listen,
Uh,
we could be in Terminator land in 3 years, and at this point, it wouldn't even matter, right?
yeah, yeah, you're right about that. But I just look at it and I go, it's technology. You know, everybody today that's freaked out about AI and jobs only have their jobs because the microchip came and everybody was freaked out before the microchip came. They're all going to lose their jobs. And then the internet came and everybody was all going to lose their jobs because there was the internet. And then the mobile phone came and everybody's going to all lose their jobs because the mobile phone came. And so, like, the jobs that people are worried about losing to AI are jobs that only exist because of the microchip, the internet, and mobile phones. The world just kind of keeps spinning in one direction, is what I'm saying. And everything will normalize. And I just don't see it as an existential threat the way other people have. But like you say, if I'm wrong, I'm going to be dead anyway. So who knows?
The Terminator is coming, right?
Yes.
I look at it like I was talking to my CMO. We wanted to do a blog series, and I said, "Hey, ChatGPT, lay out a blog series on this topic." And I'm like, now split it over 6 posts, and now do this, this, and that, and now give me a layout. And within 10 minutes, I had a marketing strategy for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
And if I have 4 marketing people, do I really need 4 marketing people? No, I can have 2 people do it, if maybe not 1. So I can absolutely see that as a tool, like, because if you look at it from that perspective, and this is taking the most simplest, most basic approach to, large language model. And I went to a security conference that also talked a lot about how AI is involved in piracy and whatnot, and you can do with AI. And they, in a span of half a day, there was a thing where they created a 30-second, I think it was a 30-second or a minute commercial for a flying chair or whatever the product was. But it was with prompts and everything else. You didn't need to have a film set. You didn't need to have anything. They created it. It took them half a day. And that's jobs. That's somebody actually creating a mock-up of this flying chair and then getting it to actually fly around and all this other good stuff. So I'm not fully with you on it's just a tool. It is definitely a tool that'll make our lives easier. But I do think that there's a lot more to it than just a tool.
Yeah.
Jobs will get cut. Not all of them, but jobs will get cut.
Yeah. I'm not gonna make that the final word because that's a little too scary. So, is there something like you said, you've been around since the early 2000s? Is what got you out of bed then still what gets you out of bed today? And or if not, what genuinely excites you about the industry today?
I think what got me out of bed in the beginning was the novelty of the technology. What gets me out of bed today are the projects that we're working on, and knowing that we have an impact that allows certain content to be, I'm being very careful, certain content to be out there for people to see. And granted, it could be a different vendor, of course, it could be somebody else, but knowing the projects that we're involved in, I'm the person who gets excited about being involved with a specific sporting event or a specific fast channel or what have you. Because I feel like if I ever get to the point where I'm jaded and I say, who cares? We deliver content. It's just a movie or whatever. Shoot me. Because I never want to be in an industry where it is entertainment and it is, date night or catching up with his favorite sports team or something that should bring joy. And I like the fact that my company is involved with delivering that joy and delivering that happy experience. And I never want to be in a position where I say, who cares? The moment I say, who cares, I should retire. I think that's what gets me up in the morning.
And that, my friends, is how you end a podcast. Olga, thank you so much. This was great. EZDRM, assuming people smart enough to figure out how to download the show will be smart enough to find the website. Thank you again. This was great.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
This is different, another round, so much more to talk about. Gonna aim to satisfy with help from CacheFly. Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast. The Anycast podcast, brought to you by CacheFly.